Hello. So, welcome to this Kant Hub. So, I am Stéphane Crépet. I am a professor in mathematical finance at University of Évry, which is somewhere close to Paris in France. And I will talk about counterparty risk and funding. And especially my focus will be on the interaction between the two. And this interaction happens when it is not only about the counterparty risk of your counterparty, but also about your own counterparty risk. Since then, you are, if you are, yourself risky, you are faced with the issue that when you need to borrow money for funding your position, you will get this money for a higher rate than what you get when you lend money. And that's when the funding of your position will be nonlinear, and this will create the complexity of this topic. So maybe I should have put in the title bilateral counterparty risk and funding. But if I had put bilateral counterparty risk and funding, maybe somebody would object that this would exclude the topic of counterparty risk, which is involved with centrally cleared transactions, so clearinghouse and the like. And in fact, it's not the case at all. Assume you would be a bank involved in centrally cleared transactions with some CCP. So you would be this risky bank facing this CCP, and in fact the mathematics, the analysis of the counterparty risk and funding issue would be exactly the same as I will show you today, except maybe you would like to assume that the CCP is risk-free or not. But even if it is, we will see that the core of the problem is your own default risk. Okay, so this covers bilateral counterparty risk in bilateral transactions, but the mathematics will be exactly the same in the case of centrally cleared transactions. Okay. So this is the outline for today. I will first introduce the topic on the board. I will start by the simplest example of a bond and a CDS. Okay. Also to clarify the difference between counterparty risk and credit risk, as we have in credit derivatives, for instance. And this example is interesting because it shows already a lot of features which are present in the real problem, well, except for simplicity. So this example is very simple, whereas another feature of this problem is that it is a very, very big problem and a very complex one. So in my next point, I will show why, starting on this simple example, CVA and the like are in fact, in the end, a very, very complex problem, like pricing and hedging a giant hybrid option, where hybrid means an option on assets of different classes. And that will be my introduction. Okay? So in principle, after the introduction, we will feel the need for clear mathematical exposition of the topic. And the next part of the course will be about model-free mathematics, which means what can we say on all that at a model-free level, okay, without too much assumptions, okay? And the way we'll do it, we'll start by a simpler case where it's only counterparty risk, so no funding issue, meaning in this first step, we will assume that the bank, which is, say, ourselves, can lend and borrow money for funding its position, at a common and risk-free rate, so RT. Okay? And of course, in the case of bilateral counterparty risk, this assumption is unrealistic. Because again, if you are yourself risky, if you need to borrow cash, you will not get as good conditions as what you get when you lend cash. Okay? Which means if it is bilateral counterparty risk, we need something more than that. We need to care about funding. And our next bullet point will be focused about funding. It means in this next point, we will forget completely about counterparty risk, and we will see what happens if you have this nonlinear funding case. Then you might argue, what is the point of considering two different borrowing and lending rates if there is no counterparty risk or credit risk of any kind involved? Then the answer might be that two different rates can be an effect of liquidity. Okay? This being said, the main interest of these first bullet points is that you can then put them together and see what happens in the realistic case where you have bilateral counterparty risk and therefore the funding issue. So we put all things together and see what happens. And this will close the second part, what I called model-free mathematics. What happens in the end of this part is that the end product of the analysis is a quite non-standard backward stochastic differential equation, which means a kind of stochastic differential equation, but which starts from the terminal time, from the maturity of a claim or maybe of a CSA, because we are, in that case, the boundary condition of the problem is given at maturity, which is maybe the time of default of a party when we know what the recovery would be. Okay? And since this equation is not in a standard textbook shape, to attack this equation, to solve it, including numerically, that's where we need more assumptions. And this will be this part 3 of the course, where we introduce assumptions on the default time of the parties, which we will model as driven by intensities. In other words, we will develop a reduced form credit risk approach for modeling the default time of the two parties, and we will develop a reduced form approach for this backward stochastic differential equation, so BSDE on the slide. Okay? And then, once we will have reduced the complexity of the problem through these simplifying assumptions, in the end, we will be able to see emerge a neat, nice, and rigorous decomposition of an aggregated valuation adjustment accounting for jointly counterparty risk and funding, and this aggregate I call TVA for total valuation adjustment, which will be neatly cut into 4 bits. So a credit bit, so CVA, credit valuation adjustment, which is your loss due to the default ability of your counterparty. Since we are in a bilateral counterparty setup, there is a symmetrical companion term of your DVA, meaning debt valuation adjustment, which is in a sense your benefit, accounting for your own default ability, if we want to record such a benefit. So we'll see how we can tune the parameters depending on the interpretation of this benefit, so that the user can decide to account or not for this kind of benefit. Then the third term I dub LVA, for liquidity valuation adjustment, which is in the sense of a funding liquidity valuation adjustment. So typically people use FVA for the funding valuation adjustment. And in fact, we will meet FVA in the course as well. But what LVA is, this is a subset of FVA, and this is a subset of FVA which is non-overlapping with DVA. It means we will see in the course that one of the things with funding is this overlap between funding costs and DVA. So partial overlap between DVA and LVA. And since we want a clear-cut decomposition, this will be in terms of DVA and the liquidity component of FVA, which I denote by this LVA. Okay? And last of all, there is a fourth guy, which is this RC that you can see here, meaning replacement cost. And this corresponds to the fact that in case of a default, the liquidator will value the contract by some scheme, and there will be a discrepancy between the value of the contract by the liquidator of that time and the value of the contract in your model right before. And this gap induces another term in the decomposition, and I call it a replacement cost because it refers to, again, the gap between the valuation before the default and the way the contract will be valued at default by the liquidator. Okay?